You enlisted in the Army in 1965, is that right?
Correct.
What was it that motivated you to join the Army?
Well, I had just graduated, and I'm from a very, very small town in California.
Hmm.
And I had a 53 Chevy that burnt a lot of oil, so I couldn't go nowhere.
Hmm.
I played too hard and didn't make it through but a semester of college. I was going with a young man in San Luis Obispo, and he was Navy Reserve. So I thought, well, I'll just join Navy Reserve. I went and I took my tests and stuff, but the Army recruiter was across the hall and said, because I was a redhead, I'd look better in green. And he had a better offer, let's put it that way, of travel and all that stuff, which I couldn't afford.
Wow.
And so I joined the Army.
Wow.
So no big, no big wonderful story. Just to get out of. I didn't want to marry a boy from back home because we were all ranch kids and grew up together. And so that was my primary reason for joining, is to see the world.
And in late 65, Vietnam hasn't become huge yet, but it's on the way by late 65. Right. When the Army recruiter says to you, see the world, did you at all in your mind attach that to Vietnam? Were you really even aware of what was going on in Vietnam at the time?
Absolutely no idea.
Wow.
No idea. None. I really thought I was kind of going on vacation. I look back now and it's kind of funny. I had packed all kinds of clothes and I went to basic training right over the holidays. So I was in receiving company for 2 weeks before I went actually in basic training. And cold, snow, ice around the windows.
Yeah.
Old barracks, so yeah, it was not a vacation.
When you joined the Army, or when you enlisted in the Army in 65, you said you really didn't have any idea of what was going on in Vietnam. When did Vietnam come into your consciousness at basic training? Is that when somebody mentioned it for the first time? When do you remember Vietnam first coming into your consciousness?
Well, I tell you what, my first duty station was Washington, D.C. And my best girlfriend, who was a company clerk at the time at Fort Myer, Virginia. I was stationed at Military District of Washington, which is no longer, and assigned to Fort Myer, Virginia. And the Pentagon came up with this idea that they were going to send WAC over there to relieve some of the soldiers from clerical administrative type stuff. We already had our nurses over there, right? Or probably not then, but so they created a compound at Tonsanut Air Force Base
in Saigon
for our women. And so my girlfriend was a company clerk, and so she was chosen to go as a volunteer. And I said, well, if you're going, I'm going, right? And had no clue where Vietnam was, had no clue about Vietnam War, nothing. Wow. Young and dumb. And I was going just because she was. And so I went to my office and said, I'm going to Vietnam. I want to go to Vietnam. And of course, yeah, right. They said, absolutely not. Women don't belong over there, blah, blah, blah. Went through all that thing. Sure. So one day I had the office to myself, and I took the bus over to the Pentagon, walked my orders through, signed myself out, and I'm heading to Vietnam.
Do I have it right that you signed your lieutenant colonel or your colonel's basically forged a signature on the?
I cannot tell you that right now.
Oh, okay.
I
But
don't even remember how I did it. I just typed up my orders, I guess,
oh, okay.
and walked them through and got them signed off at the Pentagon.
But your commanding officer told you no, but then you filled out the paperwork and basically filled out your own orders and said, I'm going.
Yeah, pretty
Did
much.
that ever come back to you? Did someone over in Saigon ever pull you aside and say,
Oh no,
where
because
did these orders come from?
my orders were legitimate because I worked in administration. I was assigned to Fort Myers, so I didn't have to have the approval of my company commander. My office, it was my boss in my office that my colonel, and he was gone that day. And I typed up, though they're legitimate orders, they can't put me in jail now.
Right, it's too late now.
But I signed them. I got them signed off by the proper people in the Pentagon.
Oh, wow. And you never heard anything from that colonel after the fact? Like,
Yeah. So
you never heard anything from the colonel after that?
no,
Yeah.
other than a lecture. He was kind of like a father, women don't belong. You don't belong in the army, let alone going to Vietnam. Da, 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 da. Yeah.
Okay.
And like a kid, they fell on deaf ears. I paid no attention to him.
Now, at this time, did you want to go primarily because my friend is going, or was there also, getting back to this idea of travel and, oh, here's an opportunity for me to go to someplace new? So was it completely that's where my friend is going, that's where I want to be? Was it partly that, and it's a different place in the world I want to go to?
Probably both. Mostly my best friend was over there. If she gets to go, I get to go. I really can't answer that question because, that's why I joined the Army, to see different places. And I'd already been across country. So, why not Vietnam? Had no idea what Vietnam was,
Now, was that still true when you're on the plane flying? When you're in the air on the way to Tan Son Nhut, did you still really not know what was going on in Vietnam or what it was all about?
I think I had a good idea because I was the only woman with how many 200 guys on the plane, GIs, and I really don't know. That's a good question. I never thought about it. I never was afraid of it. I never really gave it much thought, other than it was an adventure, just an adventure,
So you arrive in Saigon at Tan Son Nhut Air Base, in mid '66 roughly?
In February of '66.
February of '66.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the abstract that you're in a war zone, right? When was there anything that happened, and you actually extend, you're in Vietnam, I think, is it 18 months total?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Is there anything that happened in that 18 months that really drove the point home to you that this really is a war zone? I mean, it may be an adventure, but it's also a war zone. Was there something that really drove that point home? Because obviously at the time, you're not going to be in a combat role. But is there something that happened, or what was the first thing that happened when you were in Vietnam that really did drive home the point? Okay,
when I got off the plane, it was like at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And there was bombs going off, incoming mortar fire, GIs with full bayonets drawn, pack, whatever, and at 3 a.m. in the morning, in the middle of a war zone, I think you get the idea. And
Wow.
my thought was, what am I doing? I'm going to get killed. When I got to the top of the stairs before you come down, there was GIs on both sides with field gear, rifles. And in the distance, you can hear mortar fire and you can see the the flashes and everything. And so the reality of it was definitely there. And that it was, but as far as fear, and I never felt fear the whole time I was there, like I do going to the city here, the night the ammo dump went up, I got upside down from the concussion. We took pictures, we didn't have any firearms. We didn't have any bunkers. We were in wooden barracks.
Wow.
We were the pioneer group of, if you would, of the Women's Army Corps in the combat zone. And so,
well, yeah. But you're at the top of the stairs when the door opens and you're getting out of the plane. Did you have that sensation that a lot of veterans say? I'll ask them, what's the first thing you really notice about Vietnam? And they'll almost always say either the heat or the smell, or a combination of both. Do you remember that as well? Just sort of being hit with that. And now it's 3 a.m, so I imagine it'll be a little bit cooler.
But let me tell you, I found out what Vietnamese men are, and they scared me to death. I was in the airport, and it was I think it was an E6, E7. And of course, the buses were there for all the GIs. They just cleared out in a matter of minutes. And then here I sit. I'm in my summer courts, my little duffel bag, suitcase, purse, heels, because our director wouldn't allow us to wear anything but. Back then it was nylons, with the button thing. Oh, you're too young. But anyway, and he's freaking out. He absolutely does not know what to do with me. And while I'm sitting there, now, mind you, I was a bright red head. These little Vietnamese men were coming over, touching my hair. That frightened me. And they'd look, they looked at my face, and they got right in personal, and my space. And that really kind of scared me, because they were foreign to me, And
so these are things, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, these are things that are happening then in very short order, a very short period of time.
Oh, yeah.
It's really being driven home to you in a war zone. You can, you see the soldiers with the weapons, you in the distance, you can see the blasts, you can hear them. And then not much after that, folks who are from a very different culture, very different language, they're kind of, they're looking at you as some exotic specimen and touching your hair and, looking you over. So you said you never felt any fear, but, do you remember having second thoughts like, man, maybe I should have just stayed in DC?
No, I don't believe I did. I don't believe I did. Once I got past the initial getting out of that airport, and then I had, they got my sergeant out of bed, and she had to come over and get me at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, by then it was 4, and she was not in a good mood.
She didn't know you were coming?
She
didn't know you were coming?
No.
Right.
Yeah. She, well, they knew I was coming. They didn't know what flight or anything,
okay, yeah.
because they had a copy of my orders, right? But yeah, she at 3 or 4 in the morning, I'm going in my Jeep, and I'm going, okay.
Wow.
It was just an adventure, you
Sure.
really, there's a lot to that when you're young. You don't really, I didn't really think anything of it, I never was scared until I got home, till I came home.
So your sergeant comes and picks you up at about 4 in the morning. She knows you're coming, but doesn't know when, but now here she is, she's got you. You're at Tansinet Airport. Where do you go from there?
They created a cantonment area for the WAC at Tansinet. They were Quonset huts, and the one I was in was called the Tropicana. They named all the huts after Las Vegas, and there was six of us, I believe, 6 to a hut. We had a locker and a bed. That was it, and our foot locker. And it was pretty plain. Yeah. And they put me in a position, and I worked in an old wooden two-level building with I was the only girl, and about I don't know, about 18 guys. We worked in I worked in I don't know if I started out in congressionals, but that's where I ended up.
What did that work involve?
Typing.
Just
Typing.
typing orders, typing whatever they gave you to type.
Well, congressionals, GI out in the field writes to his mama and says, I'm not getting hot meals, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, they're mean to me, whatever. And she writes her congressman, and the congressman writes, and it trickles down and so forth. And so I end up with the final letter to go back to the congressman.
Oh, wow.
And so you got it goes through it goes through all the correction. You got a sergeant that corrects it, and then I retype it, and then you got a captain that and then I type it, and then you got a colonel, and so forth and so on and so forth and so on.
Wow.
And so it's a lot of and back then 3 copies, carbon paper, no mistakes. And then when you'd get it back, they'd scribble all over it. So you had to decipher. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
right.
Oh, yeah.
So you're typing up basically then the Army's response to complaints that start from maybe a soldier in the field, that goes to the parents contact the member of Congress, the member of Congress contacts the military responds, and then you're typing up you're working on getting that toward that last draft of the letter back to the member of Congress. Were you able to go into the city from time to time, into Saigon?
No.
Okay. Now, is that because you were a woman, then they wouldn't let you out, or they wouldn't let anyone out into the city?
I can't say no. No, it depends on transportation and your time off. I went into Saigon maybe 3 times. One, we had a great time, went to the zoo, and it was actual almost normal life, but we had to be very careful. We had to be in groups. We had to be, that type of thing, because the Viet Cong used to infiltrate everywhere.
When you were in Saigon, then did you feel like you did have to watch out, just be aware of your surroundings and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think you're trained. We're trained that way, and you always kind of want to watch where you're going, and just be aware,
Yeah. So you extended. What inspired you to extend? Most soldiers you hear from are checking the days off, and when their year's up, they're out of there. You extended. Why? What drove you to extend?
Well, I extended because I knew I would get out 2 months early. If I gave him another, if I extended my tour, then they would release me in September instead of December from the Army.
So the decision to stay in Vietnam had less to do with, I love being in Vietnam, and more to do with, I want to if I do that, I'll get out of the Army a couple months earlier. That was the main thing.
Yeah. Well, I think I don't know about other, well, the way I looked at it after Vietnam, I can't imagine doing another duty station, because that's kind of the ultimate when you think about it. I never really thought about it, but I am now. But
You mean to go to South Korea or to Germany or to England, someplace like that? That would be something of a letdown after the experience in Vietnam, you think?
maybe so. Maybe so.
You were in Vietnam during one of the most important historical events, I think, of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Certainly the second half of the 20th century, the Tet Offensive. And, and of course, a major part of the Tet Offensive plays out in Saigon itself. What memories do you have of the Tet Offensive when you were there?
Oh, it was pretty brutal. We had moved from Saigon area up to Long Binh in June of June, I believe, is 67, with the new headquarters in Long Binh. Used to be headquarters was built. So we were transported up there, and we lived in god awful barracks. But I remember part of some of that where the Viet Cong had infiltrated our boundaries, and when they blew up the ammo dump, which was not far from us, we had just gotten recruits in, and we were just all sitting out there watching the explosions. I mean, they were just like 4th of July,
Oh.
And we had, by then, our director allowed us into field fatigues because of the dirt, and the conditions were awful. And we were issued pot helmets, and we had some new recruits come in. Now, this is a funny story, kind of. And they were crying, they hadn't been issued the pot helmets yet. So when we were watching all these incoming, and so I had given mine to a new recruit. I told her to quit crying and she'll be fine. We were all kind of scared, I think, if I remember. And when the major part of the ammo dump went up, the ball of fire and the concussion that came through the air was, I've got pictures. And now I'm only 5 foot. And one of my sisters is over 6 foot. And she says, and I'll never forget her words. She says, "Storny," that's my maiden name, "I got your back." And she covered me with her body. Wow. When that hit. Now I'm 5 foot, she's 6 foot, and when it hit her back, she rode me across the, I come up a little bit bloody and bruised on my chin, but she probably saved my life, But what did we do? We laughed about it,
The force of the blast pushed the two of you across along the ground?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it blew out all our lockers, the doors. We lived in wooden barracks, screens, no glass, thank God. But it went through the barracks. The concussion went through the barracks and knocked all our lockers, and it was a mess. Blew out the doors. It was so powerful. And the dirt over there was, you had dirt where you didn't know you had spots. And that, I don't know at what point that was time-wise. I had to go over my notes. But I also learned that outside of my office window was a mobile unit that the officers used to get their haircuts. Well, the Viet Cong were our barbers, and we learned that they had created the infiltration and of the cantonment area, the compound, and at any given moment they could have slit throats, and we didn't know that, and we learned it after the fact, and our mama sons and our people that cleaned the headquarters, we didn't know if they were good ones or bad ones, and so it was some trying times. But as far as the Tet Offense is concerned, it was a pretty active time.
Was there a time as the Tet Offensive was unfolding? I mean, you said you had the helmet and you gave it to a new recruit. Was there ever a time where you thought, well, maybe we need to get some weapons as well, just in case?
We went out on the range one time, and the girls just they didn't have any training. We never had any weapon training. I was born on a ranch, and my father was a gunsmith and had a gun shop. So guns were very part of my life. But some of these girls couldn't even lift it, a rifle. And we had one woman, she retired warrant officer now. She's 90, whatever, still with us. She was the only one that was issued a sidearm. She was in intelligence, and if I remember correctly. And but no, it would have probably been more hazardous had they issued us weapons, because we had no training. We had no preparation for this adventure. We took a hit at the headquarters, and it blew up. Mortar came in and hit the mail room, which was down the hall for me. I used to sit out. We had concrete blocks. I used to sit out there I smoked. Army, you smoke, right? And I worked till the last bus at 10 o'clock at night. So about 7 o'clock, I'd go down and get a sandwich or something, and go out and sit on one of these blocks, and I'd watch firefights come over, bombs dropping. There was a river right down from us where they would come and strife. I mean, it was exciting. Do I sound like a lunatic? It was exciting. It wasn't scary. It was pretty exciting. I'd sit there and I write letters home to my mom, and
After you had been home for a little while, you indicated that you wanted to get out of the Army. You were ready to get out. That's why you extend, really, not so much because you want to stay in Vietnam, because you want to get out of the Army earlier. After you'd been out of the Army, say a year or two, did you find yourself missing some aspects of it? And then specifically, did you find yourself missing being in Vietnam?
Missing Vietnam?
Yeah.
No,
No, you
not
didn't.
at all.
The reason I ask that is a lot of vets will say, as awful as it was, there's something about it. Once you come back to civilian life, there's something about it that you kind of miss. There's a certain kind of intensity over there that you kind of miss, but that wasn't the case for you.
Oh yeah, it was. This is a hard part for me. This is going to be a hard part for me.
Yeah.
Talking about being in Vietnam, it's the most exciting time in my life. That's how boring my life has been. The effects of it after I got home were, that's where the scars are.
Now, so as I ask these questions, I don't want to pry, and so feel free to, to push the questions aside. Are the scars that you refer to, are they related to these experiences that you're describing in Vietnam? Or are they more related to the reception that veterans met when they, that many veterans met when they came home from Vietnam?
And the answer to that is coming home.
Yeah, yeah.
Give me 5. I'll get it together. You know, you think after 50 plus years, you could stop this emotion, but you can't. Coming home almost destroyed my life. I drank. I couldn't, my marriage was gone. My self-respect was gone, my self-worth. It was a real tough time in my life. I had no purpose. I had my family never talked about it, never asked me. I never even got a sign, welcome home. My country hated me. So, you know, that is the hard part. Being in Vietnam, I mean, I can talk about Vietnam all day long and not get emotional. The only thing that I did get emotional talking about Vietnam is, well, I used to go out to the field hospitals and to the wounded and write letters and read or whatever. And we only had half a day off. So, you know, you couldn't do much.
Sure.
And we got involved in the orphanages over there because there was a lot of GIs, babies, you know, and the nuns were overwhelmed. And so I got involved in an orphanage. When I first went to the orphanage, this is a sad story, and it's only one orphanage. The babies were laying on wire, like rabbit wire, with thin little blankets, and the dogs were licking their wounds and the flies and their feces, and I mean, they would just go down into the floor, and the weeds and the bugs, and there was no medical supplies for these nuns, and so several of us WACs went over there on our day off. I couldn't deal with the babies. I mean, we're talking little babies. I couldn't deal with that. I got more involved in the 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, and I got the Girl Scouts back home to go on a food drive, a clothes drive for me. And one day this huge box came to my office, and then the next day 15 boxes came. And the colonel come in and says, "What the hell is all this?" And I said, he said, "You get a truck and you get this stuff out of my office." So we did. The kids was, you know, they were just dagging the clothes. They hadn't seen so many clothes in their life. And it was quite an event. And the nuns were beside themselves because they don't have anything. And so in the meantime, it's been 50 years. I can't go to jail for this. We got the doctors to, appropriate medical supplies and cleaning supplies, and that's what we did. And the GIs come in and cut weeds and cleaned it up, you know, got rid of the dogs and built a fence, and but we got doctors to come in and volunteer on their days off to take care of these babies. They were awful. So
was it clear to you that at least some of these babies had American fathers?
Oh, very clear. Very clear. Yeah. They were just abandoned. They were probably women that worked the bars and stuff, and spoils war, whatever they call it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was sad because there was a lot of them. And now the Vietnamese kids, the older kids that I was with, I think they're from parents, Vietnamese parents, but the
Right.
babies
Yeah.
were abandoned
Wow.
GI babies. Yeah.
Wow. You said that you also went to the hospital and you'd write letters for soldiers who were recovering.
Mhm.
Can you just share some memories about that?
I have some memories. Are you real familiar with General Patton?
I mean, I don't know a lot. I know the general
You know the
story.
story about how he hated cowards in with the sick?
Yeah, sure. Uh-huh.
Well, he's my hero, by the way.
Mm.
When I would go to the field hospitals for the wounded, there were GIs there they can't go home because they've got incurable diseases. And they're placed in the same hospital as my wounded. And I used to get so angry, still I am, that they had no business being in the same hospital as our heroes,
These are guys who were just afraid.
What do you mean? No, these were guys that had venereal diseases that can
Oh.
be cured, and they were kept in these field hospitals because they couldn't ship home. Most of them are married, and I don't know. I said that because I'm angry about the fact that they were in with the wounded. But I'm sure they had no other place to go. But we all have our.
No, but I hear you. There should, there's a sense of justice that those who are wounded in combat should have a certain level of care, and those who have an incurable venereal disease because of bad decisions they made, that there should be a clear distinction. And it sounds like in this hospital there wasn't a clear distinction between.
Well, our wounded should require more respect than that, but and then too, we used to see the dead piled up like cords of wood, body bags, and you can't unsee that. On our way to work, you drive by the 24th of Act Hospital, and they'd be, so things like that are bad memories because it was a bad war, but that is war, but coming home, boy, that was a tough one. Coming home, no two ways about it.
Well, I want to come back to that, although I don't, again, I want to be sensitive to, you and not push that too much. When you mention writing letters, do you have any general recollections of, maybe some of the things that you wrote, some of the discussions you had with the guys for whom you're writing letters in the hospital?
There was one specific one that I wrote a letter for. He had taken a bullet and he lost his manhood. And it spiraled and went through his foot and leg. And he took several bullets, but the issue was his manhood. And he had to write his wife.
Oh boy.
And I told him, I said, and of course I was 19. What do I know, right? And but he was more, I'll never forget, he was more worried about that than he was his wounds,
Worried about how his wife would respond?
His wife is going to leave him, yeah. So, and I don't remember the letter. I just remembered this young kid. And I remember the story because it was so awful. I don't remember too much other than those two things that I covered. it was, hi mom, I'm home, I'm coming home, I'm going to be fine, things like that. But
Yeah.
um,
And then
but those two incidences, it's pretty fresh still.
yeah, and you say you remember seeing the body bags stacked up or being
Like
prepared.
cordwood, this way, that's how we used to say, oh my gosh, and that's out of the 24th WAC, which is a big hospital there on our way to work. Yeah.
So I feel like I'm getting some insight now into why the reception when you came home was so hard to take, because early in the conversation the impression I had was that there were some things that happened in Vietnam, but overall it was a pretty light experience. But now we're hearing about the hospital, we're hearing about the orphanage, we're hearing about the letter, some of the things you saw. So clearly, although you're obviously not in a combat role, the world of war is very apparent to you, and in many ways. And then you come home and you've got people your same age who, relative to you, have had lives of luxury and privilege, and now they're yelling things at you, they're making assumptions about you and about the soldiers that you served with. Is that characterization correct, that you're coming home that with the idea of, hey, I know what the 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds in Vietnam, I have a sense of what they've been doing. And now I'm coming home to you and you look like you've been having a pretty easy time of it and you're screaming at me. And there seems to be something fundamentally wrong with that. Does that characterization get to how you feel?
Uh, yeah, that and I went through therapy for this. It's like, how dare you? It's that how dare you protest when we're dying over there, whether we belong there or not. But how dare you accuse us of things that are not true? And it was such a, and that's being mild. That's like, we didn't ask you to agree on the war. We wanted your support because we went because it was our duty. And then to have your country spit at you and throw tomatoes. I'll never forget getting off of that, going into receiving to be debriefed. Sergeant says, take off your uniform to go home in for your own safety. My own country. Yeah. Oh, my own country. So that does make an impression, not a very good one, but yeah. Yeah.
Do you feel that it's has it changed now? Do you feel that, if in your mind's eye you have those protesters throwing the tomatoes, yelling the obscenities, if in your mind's eye you have them, a lot of them are still alive, they're your age. Do you think that by now most of them have come to see that what they did, that there was something basically wrong about what they did?
I don't know. I don't know how many of them even think about it, what they did, the damage, the mental damage they did to us. That's a good question. I absolutely do not know anybody that was in a protest that would even admit it to me, because they know how I feel.
If I could put one right in front of you right now, what would you say?
I don't know. I still have a lot of anger in me. I've learned to control that. Sometimes I don't, but most of the time I do. Uh, but yeah, that's a good question. I don't know what
Yeah.
I do.
Now, you weren't out in the field where they were using Agent Orange, but have you had any physical problems related to Agent Orange?
We were right in the crux of it all.
Oh, you
In
were.
order to build a headquarters, they defoliated that whole area.
Oh, I see.
And then they built the headquarters, and it's in the dust, it's in the water, it's in the air, it's in everything that we do. And a lot of our women had stillbirths, birth defects, cancers. Oh my God, I am blessed beyond belief why God has spared me, because I haven't had anything wrong with me. I had a healthy daughter. I'm suffering from old age stuff, but no, you read some of the stories or hear some of the stories of our women. I'm one of the fortunate ones.
Yeah.
I'm one of the fortunate ones.
Yeah. So then, if I'm hearing you right, then before you go from Saigon to Long Binh, they defoliate that area, and so the Agent Orange is there. So my assumption
Oh yeah,
was that you
yeah,
weren't in an Agent Orange area, but you were actually.
yeah.
Sometimes I'll ask Vietnam vets, when were you there? And sometimes the response I'll get is last night, meaning it was in my dreams. Is that the case for you too? Is Vietnam, another thing I hear from Vietnam vets is they'll say in one way or another, hardly a day goes by that Vietnam doesn't come into my mind in one way or another. It's sort of just a constant presence. It's in my dreams sometimes. I'll see something. Is that how it is with you? Is Vietnam sort of a constant presence in your life?
See, Vietnam just that was probably one of the best times of my life, where I felt like I was worth something. And
Doing
that was
something important.
taken all away when we come home, from family, from friends, from and all my school chums that I served with. When they were over there, I was with me, and so they were out in the field. I would get on the old, call them in for 2-3 days for a hot shower and a hot meal, and had to send them back. I'm still best friends with some of them today, and they remember that part. That hey, if it wasn't for you, Storny, I'd probably been shot that day or something like that, And so there's a camaraderie that I think all Vietnam vets share, a sister and brotherhood, because of the way we were treated.